Okay, we are back from a break and trying to push this author marathon, global marathon together. We've got a new person to come in the room, and it's Dr. Jamie. So I'm going to go ahead and let him in. Um, and I'm going to go ahead and share his spotlight. There we go. Okay. There we go. What? Did I get it? Yeah, I did. I got it. There he is. Okay. I was just showing them your graphic. What a great graphic. Dawn made those. Um, so Dr. Jamie Huysman is one of our co-authors, and the title of his chapter is Breaking the Cycle of Family Trauma and Reclaiming Your Authenticity. Um, Welcome. Thank you for rejoining us.
You
Now
know,
that we're
this is wonderful to join you. I think I've been in three time zones the last couple of days, but as I told John, I was looking forward to this probably at the end of the rainbow. So here we are.
Yes, it's been a good day, exhausting, but it's been a really, really good day of conversations to in talking to the others because we really haven't had a lot of just conversation with our authors and creating this project, starting this project several months ago. Actually, before that, last year was our book one was published, and that was 18 authors. Our volume two is 22 authors that we worked with, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey of meeting all these professionals and experts and and parents who've been impacted by child custody conflict and making sure that the stories that get published are stories that bring hope to people. Because, we certainly don't need more discouragement and resignation out in the world. Um, we want to bring hope.
Danica, I got to tell you that one of the exciting parts about this, it's almost like as a therapist and as a social worker or trauma therapist, however, whatever moniker you want to put. When I wrote a book with Lisa Gibbons and Dr. Rosemary Laird in 2006, it was on caregiving, right? Profession. It was dealing with families dealing with chronic, acute, and terminal illness. It began as a really for caregivers of neurological disorders. And then as we started seeing more and more when cancer was part of the diagnoses, we saw, the cognitive fog that came from that and opened it up to all chronic illnesses. And why this is exciting to be on your uh, day, your Facebook day today, and talk about this particular book is all the lessons that we figured out, Lisa, myself, and Dr. Rosemary Laird, my co-authors back then, is that the two most important phases of our lives, two most, which is parenting and caregiving, which are both pretty inevitable at some point. And I say it to those without a child because I didn't become a father till late in life. And I think, as Carl Jung would say, we have paternal energy, we have maternal energy. We don't need a child to necessarily exercise that. Archetypal energy. We can invest that into these vessels and parent them properly, protect them properly. But we had realized that at the time we wrote the book in 2006 that there was no real good education out there for caregiving. Then, of course, as we began the STAR network, which I'm sure we'll get into a bit, the survivors of toxic abusive relationships and dealing with parental alienation and high conflict divorces, the same was actually true. I mean, we came and looked at our research and saw the worst public health disaster in the world, which was attachment disorders and narcissistic abuse, and came to the conclusion we're generationally keep passing down the same type of parenting. And we think it's correct. And to be frank, and to have grace and compassion for many parents, I don't think psychology ever figured this out until the early 90s either, which we were more trauma driven, more able to retrain the brain, more able to reparent ourselves. So we got caught in that cycle of positive and negative reinforcement with raising a child. That Skinnerian, I think, hell, if you will, unless you have a controlled environment like a prison or a military, it just goes awry in parenting children. And so we, this book and being here today is something that we needed back there in 2005 and 2004 before we wrote that book, so that people could be educated properly in the way to, as we call the book, take your oxygen first. And now this particular book, Building Bridges of Hope, allows us also, at least you allowed me the latitude, and John and your whole team, to talk about neuroparenting as opposed to Skinnerian parenting. And so this gives us a great opportunity to educate, empower, and energize, the public out there. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been a wonderful, uh, I guess, project, from the heart. It's something that, we want to bring, a lot of us who have been impacted by child custody conflict and parental alienation. We want to turn that pain into purpose. And part of it is healing thyself. It's very important to not further, you know, push that, just keep kicking it up down the hill. And it's important to heal yourself so that you can heal others and you can help maybe navigate. I know back 25 years ago when I found myself unexpectedly in this space, and nothing. I mean, I was just like calling through the internet to try to find something. And it's when I stumbled across Divorce Poison, and there was a couple other books, but there were no groups that I could find. And I thought, you know what? That's why I'm here. I want to take this pain and I want to somehow give people a shortcut to find their healing quicker. And because it is a very dark place to feel so alone and like nobody understands.
No,
So.
and we don't. And whether you're a participant in the courts of law and dealing with parental agreements or high conflict caregiving, I had a whole nother look at it years ago, prior to me even being a father, and that was as an expert witness in domestic abuse with high conflict divorces. And I was often brought in as a social worker. We're family systems driven, so we look at the children, we look at the spouses, we look at the generational trauma. We look at the social determinants of health, the adverse child experience. We look at it all. It's family systems. But I became even more, if you will, how do I say this? Disappointed, I'll say, when I was actually a paid expert, watching what I knew clinically was really happening to the court systems, where the judges weren't trained properly. Okay, and their dockets were 17 to 25, at least it was in South Florida, cases they had it per day. This particular diagnosis, the toxic individual that rises to 5 indicators or greater on the cluster B scale, was pretty much a chameleon. I mean, just a master of images, and could turn things around in a minute. And many years ago, long before I became a father, I looked at cases where I would actually Baker Act in Florida. We call that if somebody's homicidal or suicidal, us clinicians had the opportunity to place them in a safe environment for 72 hours to stabilize them. By time I would send a cluster B, not a bipolar individual or schizophrenic or primary psych diagnoses, but simply the access to basically the cluster B, they'd get to the ER and immediately they find somebody to abrogate the Baker Act. Why? Because they could turn right back into a very, stable, very much believable image. And they did that in courts of law. And that was when I watched the disappointing process that A, the judges weren't trained, B, the lawyers were also burned out or had secondary traumatic stress and weren't trained properly. And I don't know, one of my hopes, and there's a lot of hopes at this stage of my AARP life I have, is to create a diversion program for high conflict divorces, to be able to allow the children not to be emotionally abused by the court system and these huge long dates where you have the opportunity to alienate a child and to win a quote unquote war and get back at your partner. This should be like in Florida, we called it drug court when I got involved with Governor Bush many years ago, a diversion program that the high conflict relationships that were in the divorce court should have their own particular trained environment with shorter court dates so that children didn't get abused even more by the state.
You kind of, I have been involved in the dependency court side as a guardian ad litem. And in concept, the dependency court, I wish that they would adopt some of those things and put them into family court because it is about having, status hearings and team-based approach and with the mission of bringing the child, reconnecting the child with the parent. And it's unfortunate that they can't actually make it functional because I know that the dependency court isn't exactly functioning, but in its premise, it could be very functional, especially like in family court.
I agree. And we also have the issue, and nobody really talks about it much. So let's bring it up here. I think this book has so many different points of view and so many powerful chapters in it. Just think about this, the foster parents who really also I trained, and I'm sure you have as well, and many times. And the guardian ad litems that I've seen sometimes were friends of attorneys, right? Who not
Mhm.
necessarily were trained, but the foster parents too. And you almost without clinical intervention, without the self-awareness of their own therapy, they could also alienate a child in the foster care system, right? So that when the father or mother was working as hard as they humanly can to recover and get stable and take care of their lives, sometimes, again, in our system at DCF in Florida is so overwhelmed, besieged, and beleaguered that case managers wouldn't realize that a foster parent or foster family could really want that child within their own family and do what
Mhm.
they could, or irregardless of how hard the other person was working. And again, this calls for very trained environments, very trained professionals, and an ability I call almost to triage somebody or some couple at that point of entry into the court system. Now, you're much more trained in that, Danica, than I am. But I've always seen it, unfortunately, from afar. And to me, the system has so much to do to really become a level playing field, both for the children and for the spouses of a toxic individual.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is rooted in lack of education. So that they don't understand. Like the judges, the lawyers, I mean, all of them, they don't get first way they don't know what's going on. They don't know how to recognize it, and they don't realize the impact that they would have on the family negatively by making the wrong ruling or kicking the can down the road so that don't have to make a decision because a lot of judges will just they don't want to make a decision like that. So they just postpone it until the family runs out of money and then they just stop going to court and the more ruthless of the parents wins out of default.
It's also so impossible, I would say. I mean, look at us talking here. Many of us, I'm not going to speak for the other participants of this call, but I can certainly say I, as a psychologist or as a therapist or a social worker, have experienced a toxic abusive relationship. And if we who have clinical backgrounds or the ability to be skilled can walk into that particular one, unbeknownst to ourselves, then the world is pretty much cannon fodder. And so why I say that is because, currently in my other job, which I'm now in the consulting capacity, is to integrate behavioral health. We've separated the mind and body to such a fairly well. The shame and stigma of mental health has still, in the year 2025, at the release of this book and years to come, we've got a lot of work, has still so siloed, so shame driven that to your point, lawyers who became my clients later, or judges who became my clients, human beings, not as human doings, who then went through a toxic, a relationship, or who then went through a high conflict issue, all of a sudden said, aha, I get it. I got to go through this hell. And I think that's the case with mental health per se. I deal with 40,000 employees, and our corporate executives, God love them, really, we're a medical group. They don't understand psychology, or they don't understand the cluster B or the attachment disorder. Somebody with five indicators or greater is no empathy, no accountability, and transactional until it literally happens to them. And so I'll get a call in the middle of the night that, oh, my son's gone into treatment, or I'm in the middle of a terrible divorce, and my partner's doing this to me. Then all of a sudden, complex trauma or PTSD arrives in their mind. It's always something out there until it's not. And I think because of shame and stigma and the inability to educate and empower a public out there waiting, wanting, thirsting for the proper parenting approach, we've just put it underneath the carpet, and we're walking on a lumpy carpet as a society.
Boy, that's the truth. It's, I was something that was really shocking to me, 25 years ago, is people, first of all, this term parental alienation was so foreign that people didn't know how to wrap their head around. But even further, I was quite shocked that the counselors, guidance counselors at the kids' school, the school psychologists, people who were professionals had no clue how to recognize parental alienation. It was something where we, if you're impacted by it now, it was your job to educate the professionals that should have known before we did. I was just really surprised, and then they become accomplices of the alienating parent because the alienating parent just recruits, and it just
Now, the only way I'm so sorry. Go ahead, please
no,
continue.
fine. Mm.
No, the only way to go is to find somebody who's actually gone through this hell and come out the other side. Like you say, they can paint the purpose. And I'm including therapists in this. I ran therapist groups. I'm a therapist down here in South Florida.
Mm.
And we have a very clinically challenged profession. You know, um, the countertransference of the people, whether I supervise them for licensure or they came to their own clinical groups, if they hadn't done the necessary work, they're projecting their stuff constantly on the clients. And so when you go to like you're saying, the guidance counselor level, the mental health counselor, the social worker in the school system, they get co-opted too. The codep I always say this, and because I can say it, I'm a recovering codependent, right? Quote unquote. We, during the days of Bill and Bob and AA and NA and CODA, which we're still in now, we didn't have an answer of how the brain really worked and the cluster B worked. So I had to find my place. I came through severe, complex trauma as a child, and it was always codependency anonymous. That was the place, which are people, places, and things, making our self-esteem work. Well, my gosh, it wasn't until, Pete Walker or even in, let's say, Marshall Linehan's work with dialectical behavioral therapy that we still, well, Bowlesby's work, the attachment issues that were out there was the real deal, the attachment issues in childhood. So if I am, who have now 35 years of recovery in CODA, did not have my therapy, did not have, and by the way, I still walked into hell with all the therapy in the world, with all the skills you can imagine, with all the recovery. But I know people can be co-opted left and right. When to me, and then I'll leave this to the group, but I work with toxic work sites all the time at my organization at WellMed Medical and Optum Health. And nobody's going to believe the medical director who's got phenomenal numbers, who is absolutely stellar in terms of what they perceive as the metrics and analytics of population health. Certainly, nobody's looking down at how many staff was lost, how many patients were lost, how many caregivers were lost, how many nurse practitioners and doctors have left that practice. But nobody can believe that that doctor is thinking like a 5-year-old, that that doctor has an attachment issue, and that the entire sort of persona of this doctor, this brilliant doctor, nobody's saying a cluster B can't be brilliant. They have the emotional capacity of a 5-year-old because they default to the attachment. It's a disorder. That's why we always say at Taranon, which is our support groups at the Star Network, it's not your fault. You didn't raise that other person. Certainly didn't raise yourself if you're picking toxic people too. But the trauma was never your fault, but the healing is now your responsibility.
Yeah, I love everything that you're saying. In fact, I feel like you are like Elise in a lot of ways without the accent from Australia. So you too bring forth this really powerful message in this book. And I love the fact that we have your two voices in here that are speaking to this degree of, how do we educate those of us that we're seeking the help from, and how to, the vicarious trauma is always a concern in a lot of us, here on this panel, even because of the stories that we hear. But as mental health practitioners and professionals, they're having to hear a lot of this. So how do they deal with that? So the fact that the two of you have that particular angle, and she's writing a treatment protocol for adult survivors of severe um, child psychological abuse, and also with the mental health professionals that work with them. So I really want to make sure you two have an opportunity to have a conversation and get to know about each other's work. So I think
Don,
it's
I would be
amazing.
honored. I would be honored. Many people don't
She'd be here right
realize.
now, but she just woke up, so she's like, nah.
Well, listen, we're working with wonderful experts in Australia. Jane Phipps has been writing for us from her toxic worksite capacity. But I want obviously the listeners and the viewers of this wonderful, it's first time today, as well as for the book to understand that, and I want to be very generous because she's not my patient, and it's terribly unethical for any of us to judge or to make a call of what a diagnosis is if somebody's not our patient. But Dr. Marsha Linehan was self-professed cluster B. Dr. Marsha Linehan said that she was diagnosed with borderline behavior
So she
and
has the
borderline.
lived experience,
Well, yeah, and she
and that's
created
very
one of the most,
important.
incredible. And the one of the most, and we can get into a big clinical diatribe here. I do believe there is hope for the BPD, oddly enough. They almost have too much empathy. They're a little different than the other three cluster Bs. However, Marcia realized that she created, I think, a fabulous, fabulous modality in DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. It's the moment, it's the mindfulness. It corresponds to Dr. Daniel Goleman's work at Harvard with high EQ. It's today. It's the way to retrain our brain. The unfortunate part for Dr. Marshall Linehan, and she's still around to tell us this, that not many people came to therapy because the cluster B doesn't believe that they're accountable. It could never be their fault. It's always somebody else's fault. I can't take ownership. And so it turns out, though, that DBT is still extraordinarily effective, whether it's, anxious attachment style or, avoidant attachment style, or the very few may have secure attachment style. But DBT is for any attachment issue. And so we use it in the work site, actually. And I had to do a trauma-informed program called the Emotional Support Response Team. And we use all those principles. But to your point, Dr. Marsha had to go through it.
Yeah,
Jamie probably had to go through it. John had to go through
Elise has
it.
been through it.
Danica,
Yeah,
Dawn
Elise
had
is
to go
a
through it.
yeah. Elise is also a child survivor of CPA with abduction as well. We're both abducted survivors, so she
Mm.
does have her own lived experience, and she's able to see what others don't see in her practice. So it's really powerful to have that lived experience piece in there, because I think it does bring the empathy for the patient,
It does,
the
and
understanding
and
that
I don't want
trauma.
to be too ego driven here. The hubris is I didn't think I had any issues. I mean, honest to God, I've been in
Sure,
therapy since
yeah,
I was 15 years old. My mom, God rest her soul, even though it was a poop
that's
show.
part of our upbringing, though, too, isn't it? That nothing's wrong, just
Well, yeah, but
don't
I
point it out.
think I was when my daughter always comes out and said, "Dad, why are you working at midnight?" And I said, "Well, honey, on this one, I don't get any remuneration. I'm a volunteer in this capacity." I said, "I think I was touched by the hand of God," and so I can't go deep into it, but I can with you in this book. Is that I think, and I know today, the blind spot for me, because I kept looking in the mirror. I said, "How could I end up like this?" I kept asking myself that when I got off of my knees, of course, and had gone through the darkness of not knowing if I'd get to the other side. I said, how could I go through this? And then I realized that I missed complex post-traumatic stress recovery, that we have not placed it in a DSM-5. I believe from the bottom of my heart, working in the healthcare industry, that it'll bankrupt the country when we look at complex PTSD or 0 to 8 or in utero trauma. And I truly believe it's vital. That's what Taranon is all about. And so that was, years and years ago. But when John, myself, the Star Network now creates Taranon, it was, I guess, had to be shown it had a severe blind spot. I had looked at addictions, co-addictions. Codependency is an addiction, by the way. I want everybody to understand that Lois back there in Bill and Bob days called it co-addiction. America has just cleaned it up and called it codependency. But all addictions are trauma responses. And frankly, I might have had to go through hell because Tarnon to me was what was missing in terms of my recovery. So with all the hubris and ego I thought I had and all the therapy I had, I really didn't have the most important, which was how do I reparent this brain? How do I really go backwards in time and do the proper neuroplasticity and actually embrace through emotional regulation, Jamie? And then how do I do this with healthy people for the first time ever? So it was such a blind spot. And with all deep, accountability, I now feel and know. Why? And I guess we had to go through this. It's a minefield, but we had to.
Yeah, I'll have to say that as an adult survivor who has looked for therapy, there was a lot of times that my therapist had no idea what actually occurred to me. Of course, then at the time I didn't either, but I knew how to describe the situations, but nobody ever brought up the words child psychological abuse, parental alienation. Nobody ever mentioned those. So then I find a new therapist because I move, and all of a sudden I'm having to regurgitate and retrain this next therapist to understand the trauma, the type of trauma that I went through. And then they get, the vicarious trauma, and they think it's very intense, and they're not exactly sure how to help me. And I think that's pretty prominent in the area where adult survivors are now seeking specific kind of treatment, and who knows about it, who knows what that is. So I think it's important, everything that you have said and things that I've heard Elise talk about. You two are like a needle in a haystack when it
Thank you.
comes to how many are capable or aware. I guess aware would probably be a better word, because I believe that they're capable, they just don't have the awareness yet.
Yeah, and being aware is the key. And you all do a phenomenal job. I've just become close to your work, all of yours through John, and you're creating awareness is what Sigmund Freud says. Once you're aware, you're no longer naive, and you can't sit with cognitive dissonance, and so you have to transform.
You
Well,
have to fix it. Yeah.
you have to
That's a
fix it, right?
cybersecurity rule number one. If you know that there's a risk, you have to do something about it.
Bingo. And that's also the software of our brain box, right? So
Operating system. Yeah.
a transformation can come anyway. As we say at Tarnon, it could be, look, AA, NA, Coda. We work with all fellowships. It could be Jesus, Moses, Buddha, Allah. We believe,
Yeah.
though, that the reparenting piece of ourselves, the neuro kind of regulation, the ability to embrace our neurological system, which we never did, becomes now what we believe is the path. And is to reparent ourselves is to go back. And what is it? It's also to realize that, don't let perfection ever be the enemy of good, that our progress is three forward, two backwards at best. But as long as we keep moving forward, and my boss said this to me,
And
Jamie,
trying.
how can this work with 70 and 80-year-old people? And I said, George, you're looking at one. I said, just if we can see and feel authenticity ever in our life, I said, then we found the cure that, the end of the rainbow, if you will.
That's right.
Yeah, it's amazing. Great, great stuff.
I appreciate all of you all and anything I can do to help this book and anything the Star Network can. And again, we're a 501(c)(3), and you have John there, and John has been one of the most important parts of our network. And John, we hope we'll convince him to come on our board of directors. But there's nothing we wouldn't do to help promote this book, Danica or Dawn or John. I think it's getting this out to educate finally, where we didn't have this shot in the 2000s with our book. It couldn't be anything more important. And with the experts that you've assembled here, it couldn't be a better group.
Well, it's been a wonderful journey. It's been just meeting all these people that have sort of found their way to us, um, and being able to collaborate so that more people can have access to this. It's been great. And I know you mentioned a few months ago about the possibility, I'm putting you on spot, of helping us with the Audible for the books. So
I would
So I'm
love to. I am being trained up because at the Star Network we're going to be releasing in 90 days Tar Tales, which is the big book for us, and they're training me. And even though I've done voiceovers and stuff since the 90s when I was in
yeah.
TV, I guess I'm not good enough yet. So when I'm done being trained by these our publishers, I would love to assist if I can do it better. This is the type of book I think is the most important thing. I'll leave you with this. We at the Star Network have three pillars, which are support, which is Taranon, but it's also treatment, which we'd like to oversee complex trauma treatment that is properly done. I think our treatment world unfortunately does things expediently and not properly. And so we'd like to oversee it. But the most important thing is what you're all doing here, which is the prevention. If you can train somebody not to create the attachment disorder by teaching them the proper neuroparenting, then we can prevent finally, and we
Mm.
do know that. And so there's nothing more I'd rather dedicate my time, Danica, to in terms of an audio book than to assist you all in any way, shape, or form. So just call on me. Prevention is it. I won't see my grandkids, but it's the least I can do for them.
I know,
All right.
I know earlier on during the day we had some interesting conversations on AI. And I know, Jamie, you're doing some phenomenal game-changing things on AI. I don't know if you'd be able to share with our readers some of the great things that they can expect coming fairly soon on that front.
Well, thank you, John. Well, I'm in an unenviable position at WellMed and Optum to vet AI because we all know
Hmm.
there's not enough mental health providers in the world to serve
Well,
the mental health needs.
before you go on, I work with Optum. I work actually in cybersecurity for United Health Group.
Oh my gosh, you are then a rare person. You are the
So I
cream of
am
the cream.
working on
You
their
are.
AI security. Yep.
Oh my Lord. I hope the whole public knows that when gosh, I love that day when Obamacare broke down, they only called one group, and that was y'all. I'm in the clinical side, but boy, the tech side, I salute you for that. Um, but I have had the pleasure, sometimes pleasure, I'll call it, they asked me to do due diligence. I'm a duck in a hen house, right? I'm in a medical primary care delivery system of 40,000 people. So, but as a psychologist, therapist, I integrate mental health. So they bring the AI products to me to see what do I think. And most of them, a lot of them, I'll say disproportionately, were out of Mumbai and India at the time, and I looked at them and I listened to them, and every one of them came out to me, unfortunately, which I think psychotherapy and psychoanalytic work can still do, was like a learned helplessness model. What does that mean? Well, at 3 in the morning, I'd ask a question and it would tell me kind of what to do based upon the experts who downloaded the information. So to John's point, we knew, and we still know today, to scale properly trauma recovery, which we're doing through Taranon. It's a fellowship, Toxic Abusive Relationship Anonymous, to do it with intimate partner abuse, to do it in the toxic work sites, you name it, high conflict caregiving. It's going to be vital, necessary, and urgent, if you will. And it has to be done well. We knew we needed AI to do this and scale because we're looking to go to Africa. We were asked to go to a war zone in like IDF in Israel, the Gaza Strip, Ukraine, anywhere trauma is, we're a virtual trauma network. Listen, I'll be honest with you. I didn't think we would be. This was one of those unintended consequences of Tarnon, intimate partner abuse, but it became a virtual, scalable trauma network that could be private labeled. You didn't have to call it Tarnon. So looking for an AI company was difficult. And John and I both actually met in New York City with a group called My What If. And they're scarce as hen's teeth to find an AI company that's also a 501(c)(3). But even more, we really hit the jackpot because it wasn't that learned helplessness model. You ask me a question, I'll tell you what to do. Recovery is how do we retrain our brains? How do we repair ourselves? How
Rewire
do
it.
we
Yeah.
develop resilience, right? And that you have to lean in. You have to go, we call it through the TAR dojo. So my what if is basically an AI storytelling component where John and I kid around. I call it systemic hope. No offense. I was a philosophy major before went into the world of psychology and therapy. And Søren Kierkegaard, obviously we all know, is a Christian existentialist philosopher, always said, hey, forget hope. Hope is like a poison. If, despair is a better motivator than hope. And in so many ways, he was correct. Hope can kind of lull you to sleep. This was a systemic sort of AI machine that you could actually pour your personality into and answer the necessary requisite questions. And then it's my what if. It's just what it is. Ask, well, what if? I didn't make this decision. And the CEO there was unfortunately hugged by a suicide bomber 21 years ago and has not really slept well ever since, obviously, though he recovered miraculously. And he wanted to create something that was more, akin to my what if. What if I didn't do this? What if I do that? And so what this allows us to do instead of gaining the answers, it allows mywhatif.org and Omir, is the CEO that John and I are working with right now. He said, look, we can join hands together. And for me, it's music to my ears. And I'm sure Dawn and Danica in the world of psychiatric treatment, which I find very challenging because only 1% of the people could possibly afford a $50,000 30-day length of stay for trauma. What we're trying to do at the Star Network, and John's working very closely with us, is to create a recovery for trauma for under $30 per person. And the only
Wow.
way we can do this is to scale with AI and my what if and Tarnon. So he was in search, or his organization was in search while they did the research with Columbia University for a peer-to-peer group. While we were in search, well, how are we going to get over to, Ethiopia or to Israel or
Yeah.
to the Gaza Strip? So we found each other. And anyway, December 18th, I'll just throw out the quickie here for everybody. We're doing an art symposium at Chelsea where we're working together. We're their major sponsor in Chelsea for this beautiful art show, this juried art show. But more importantly, when we test our next 100 people coming out of Taranon, and we're looking to do this possibly now dealing with a trauma network for police officers in New Jersey, we're going to be able to measure the metrics and outcomes and the recovery based upon that. I know, Dawn, since you're in the tech world,
That's
I don't,
amazing.
I don't want to create junk science. I want to create something that's
No,
real.
no, I love it. I love it. And
So
have you heard Dr. Childress's work on what he's doing with AI?
I listen. I am open to you sending me every solution you
Yeah.
think. John knows
Well,
the
and
way I
he's
think.
he's not working with the trauma area that you are. He's actually using AI for custody evaluations.
Sure.
So different area, but he's utilizing AI, and that's part of the conversation that we were having earlier with John and talking about how I'm a proponent of AI. I love using AI. I love what I can do with AI. I don't like what bad actors can do with AI. And I work on predator profiling and trying to bring that awareness again to prevent childhood trauma of being coerced online through predation. And now AI is going to become, if it's not already, the online predator
Yes,
because
I
it's
think you're
already in
100%
that
right.
position.
Dawn, I think you're right. And I was one of those doomsayers about AI, but then I started thinking, right, first of all, I'm in this world of shame and stigma. I myself was diagnosed early as a kid with depression and ADD, felt the shame and stigma and the isolation back then. As much as I look at AI today and realize it's not the answer on the psychotherapeutic sort of approach or not the neuro-safe relationship between a patient and their therapist, I'm also a realist knowing again that there's mental health disorders and issues around this world that will never, ever have enough providers to treat it.
And people are
So
turning to their app.
they are. So I would love it to like the one you just mentioned sounds like an ideal sort of application for AI and for us as we vetted AI, having your personality poured in and asking it, well, what if I don't go to this meeting? Or what if I actually go to that toxic individual and sit there and I'm doing well in recovery? Or what if it allows us then to be the stewards of our own mental
Yeah.
health?
The big thing is we're going to have to turn off the switch of AI being a people pleaser because right now it's a big people pleaser on the person that's asking the question, the user. So when it's saying, if I'm saying, what if I don't go to this meeting and it thinks it knows me because that's its game is to get into my brain and try to understand me and preempt the answer I'm looking for. So if I don't want to go to this meeting, is it going to say, if you don't go to this meeting, you're going to fall behind, you're not going to have the support system that you need in order to stay whatever XYZ? Instead, it's going to say, well, you've got a lot of things on your plate. You could probably tackle one of those and get something done. Why don't you just skip this meeting? You can always go next week. That's what AI is designed to do, to people please me as the user. So we
Well,
have to
Don,
turn that switch off and
I
say,
agree.
AI, tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear.
So, and we do this at Tarnum because what we're trying to do is obviously parent our own selves, right? And we're doing it with a healthy, non-judgmental family around us. And I love what you're saying, Dawn, because to me, sycophants should not be allowed in life any longer. And I'm sure I had my share of people who enabled me and placated me as well. And Dawn knows in our organization, I always say, please tell me when my baby's ugly. Please tell me. So I'm going
Yeah.
to learn from that. I'm going to grow from that, and I'm
Mhm.
going to be safe in that. But to your point, and I think in the hands of somebody like you, Dawn, who you kind of get both worlds, I'm hoping against hope that we have the foresight that it will be able to, in a compassionate way, be authentic, more authentic, and confront
Yeah.
us as
We're
opposed
going
to
to have to
enable
teach
us.
it. We have to prompt it right. Like I had to turn mine into, I told it, I gave it God rules. I said, under no circumstances do you respond with the answer you think I want to hear. You are the chief of staff. You are, the brand ambassador. You are the one that says, I need to do this instead of that. Don't tell me what I want to hear. And it does, it sticks to that. But I had to teach it. And it took several months to really get it honed in to not just give me the answer I want, that I'm looking for. Even when I complain, I'm like, look, let me vent, let me bitch, let me do whatever. And you still come back with the right answer, not the one I want.
I am so grateful to hear that you're on the helm of the tech world. Listen, this is going to die my phone, my computer. It's amazing it's made it this long, but all I can tell you is deeply grateful. So looking forward to
We're
this.
grateful for you too. Thank you.
Anything I can do to promote this. I know John is going to be right there on the board of directors, and we don't say no to anything. And to your point, also, Dawn, and to Danica, if you come to my office, I may be the doctor, but like you said, Dawn, you want that AI and other people to be the doctor when you go in their office, and not to be that. And so, please tell us, tell John, tell me how best we can support this effort, and we'll be there for you. We'll definitely be there. This is a book that I think is vital to get out there so soon, so quick. And today on Black Friday, I'm sure it's soaring to the top, and I'm grateful to be a part of it.
Awesome. We're glad that you are a part of it. I'll get you introduced to Elise. I think that will be a cool conversation.
Please, Australia's on my bucket list. Have a
Yeah,
great
mine
one.
too.
Thanks,
All right.
Amy.
Thank you
Take
again.
care.
Thank you. Take
Bye.
care. Bye bye.
That
All
was
right.
amazing.
Yeah, it was. It was. It
It's
was
good to
a
get to know him a little more.
great conversation. Great conversation and kind of like wrapping up the day, aren't we? Is there anybody else?
We have a video from Charlotte Smith from London
Okay.
that has sent us something. So
Well,
if you
let me pause mine and start the recording again.